Welcome to another A Healthy New Zealand podcast. Today it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to my friend Anna Preuss. Anna is in Sydney and she has a really interesting business. She's a yoga teacher and a mindfulness teacher. So she's got quite a bit to chat to us today about that. She's been in lockdown for a few weeks and has another 6 weeks ahead of her, I think. So we can talk about coping strategies for that kind of thing. And Anna is also a dressage rider. She rides at advanced level and she has come from Germany. So she's got that whole German dressage school background.
Yeah.
For all my dressage riding friends that are listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome Anna. Thanks for coming along.
Hi, nice to see you.
Yeah, it's great. So, we talk quite a lot about mindfulness and awareness, mindfulness around how we eat and how we live our lives and our practice, and how you bring mindfulness into your kind of yoga teachings. So do you want, it's a little bit different than the normal yoga classes.
Yeah, I mean, when people think about yoga, first thing they think about is the physical asana practice. We are bombarded in the media of people posting Instagram photos in front of beaches and sunsets looking all glamorous. And it's really that stigma of the lean, early 20 female doing some sort of contortions with her body that we in the Western world define as yoga. Yoga, however, is really like a more than 5,000-year-old wisdom practice from ancient India, which is really an eightfold path to bring us onto the path of self-realization and mindfulness, or mindfulness as the path to bring us there. That physical asana practice is really only one of those 8 paths. And I do believe that there is absolutely merit, especially in this world that we live in right now, where we're so much up in our heads, sitting at desks, working, and there is a lack of, for many people, physical movement in their everyday lives, so that we become detached from the body, that there is merit in the physical practice as a means to just reconnecting our mind, our soul with the body, and using that as an entry point to awareness. And awareness of our physical body helps us then bring us to have awareness of our thoughts, of how am I actually feeling. And rather than self-medicating or pushing emotions and thoughts away, or just being the victim of our thoughts, that we actually can become more of an observer. We can see things arising, we can notice things, and then based on that can make choices on how we respond to them, rather being in a reactive relationship with those things, and kind of just go down the same loophole that we always go down.
I think that's a really key point. I mean, you're quite a blessing in my life, because you always
Ditto.
You always bring me back to, like, oh, hey, did you just hear what you said? Or did you just see that kind of thought cycle that you've got going there, And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And it's really great, to have you there. I'm very fortunate that you're there reminding me of those things. I'm quite blessed.
And at the same time, it's always easier for someone externally to notice those things. And I think that's where a yoga, a mindfulness, a meditation practice can help us by not being as involved in our thinking, by not being so merged within it, have that little bit of space that we can become our own observer to a certain extent. And look, I mean, you and when we're speaking in our groups, you still pick me up on things as well. So it's not that you do yoga and you become this enlightened being. I mean, yes, it happens to some people I have heard of. I haven't actually met anyone yet, but it definitely just helps us provide a path and some guide stones to walk along on that journey to just ultimately more happiness. And at the beginning, more awareness doesn't always lead to more happiness. At the beginning, it can actually lead to more self-doubt and critique, but because many people, when they start a yoga or meditation practice, actually just kind of like you stir the water and you notice how dirty it is before you can start seeping and cleaning, and just realizing that that it's not you who is incomplete or who needs fixing, but it's really just you're cleaning the windscreen of all the in yoga they're called samskaras, so they're mental impressions that we have accumulated by thoughts and actions and how we were raised, of how we perceive the world. And the yoga practice, mindfulness, meditation practice, for me, all those three things are really, you can replace them and they all more or less bring out the same. They all just help us unpeel the onion, clean that windscreen again and again, because there's just always new stuff coming up for us to then unpack and come back to. In the end, it's just a journey of the self back to the self, in all our beauty and perfection that we just are hiding beneath all of the clutter and things that we've accumulated along the way.
I think that's really interesting because I, as you know, I work with a lot of women who have health problems, and most of the people I work with also want to lose weight. And that, that's a fairly standard sort of goal or objective, for a lot of people. And they often feel that they're self-sabotaging, because they get into these cycle of thoughts where they sort of make promises to themselves and then they don't keep the promises, or something goes wrong. What advice would you give, or how would you help them move out of that kind of cycle?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to say at this point that in our current society, when things arise, when our health declines, when we put on weight, unfortunately, currently in our society, what we do is we try and find these quick fixes. There's a medication for that, there's a pill to lose weight, rather than taking the time to get to the root issue of what has led me to go down this path. Because these things don't just arise overnight. There's lots of choices and lots of life events that have led to us making certain choices, and in the ultimately arriving at that point where we are at that point in time, where all of a sudden there is some life event or a realization where you see that photo of yourself where you're just like, no, this is enough. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. Or you get a diagnosis from a doctor that just really just stops you in our track. And unfortunately, us human beings oftentimes need these big things to happen to kick us into action. And I think that's where, when we engage in a yoga, mindfulness, meditation practice, we are more closely connected with ourselves. And so we become a lot more sensitive to what's going on, to how am I feeling in my body? Am I full? Am I just eating because that's habitually? Am I actually eating because I'm sad? Rather than, so we just bring that level of awareness and insight to ourselves. And I think the other thing to add to that is that we're treating ourselves with a whole lot more compassion and kindness and love. And of course, I mean, people need to arrive at this point of wanting to make a change motivated, and I think you're an incredible person for them to work with, because you are such a great cheerleader on their way, and such a great coach in terms of giving them feedback and giving them direction. But they also need to become their own cheerleader. They actually need to become their own best friend rather than their biggest critic. And it's not, I still work on myself to not being super critical about myself and my body every single day. But we just arrive at a point where that critical voice pops up, and where we can then say, okay, well, if I were my best friend, what advice would I give this person? How, rather than continue beating her up, beating myself up, how can I change that conversation into one that's more kind, and that helps me be more resourceful on my journey to healing, on my journey to well-being.
Yeah, self-care is a big part of the model that I use in my work, is encouraging people to find what self-care means for them, because I think when you make your decisions from a perspective of, I'm caring for myself, I'm looking after my body, I'm looking after myself the best way I can, rather than sort of almost being at war with your body and sort of hating it. And so you're doing things that are really against the well-being of your body and against the care of your body.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where, if you're on that war path, you may win a battle here and there, but you'll never win that war.
No.
Because in the end, you're fighting against yourself. So one of you is always going to lose. And that's, I mean, yoga, the word yoke in Sanskrit comes from yoke, from uniting, from union. So how can we become one team with ourselves, supporting each other, self-nurturing ourselves? And again, this is just where, speaking of samskaras, speaking by mental impressions and experience, that kind of our psychological imprint where we are right now. Like, if you look at how we grew up and how our society works, is you celebrate with alcohol, you celebrate by indulging with a big ice cream. I mean, I'm still guilty of that myself. So it's really having someone like yourself on your team to just help with that creative process of looking at what alternatives are there. And it's often also the environment that we are in is often very conducive of the path that we have gone. So, and that can sometimes be the hardest part of change, that all of a sudden we don't fit in with our people anymore. So how do the changes that I want to make impact me and my social environment, and creating another environment where me as the version of myself, that deeper, truer, real me, rather than the me that's all muddled up, has more opportunity to flourish and to be supported and to grow.
Yes, that is always the challenging part. I know I always find that challenging myself, is, you know, the expectations of friends and family around, you know, what you'll do, and, you know, you're the odd one out, or you're the weirdo, or you're the
Exactly, or you're the big one in the family.
or yeah, and that can be quite challenging,
yeah,
you know, to deal with. And I think that's where you need to be quite clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
yeah,
You know, and that you're doing it absolutely for yourself. You're not doing it for anybody else at all.
yeah. And ultimately, once you are committed to that path, and I don't think you can do it alone. I do think, like, people need support such as yourself and maybe one or two people in their environment, in their family, circle of friends, to just like believe in them and stick with them and see that potential in them to change, rather than trying to keep them small and keep them in the way that they are or have always been. But ultimately you will be so much like, once people see that you are changing and there's just no denying it because you're so committed to your path, it's actually so inspirational to see someone who is on that journey and who does it despite everything else. And it's not easy, but it's a damn good feeling for that person and for all those that have been there to support them along the way.
I noticed that a lot of people make very good progress in the beginning. They come, they've decided, they've made a decision, they're going to make some changes in their life and, in their nutrition and perhaps in their exercise and maybe some other things, because things like relationships and things like that have a huge impact on the big picture. And they make progress for a while. And normally the progress, in the beginning, the progress is quite steady, but as it plateaus, the conversation becomes around achieving the progress, not the internal changes. And then quite often they'll drop off and they'll just say, oh, it just got too hard, or they feel like they're doing it because they are at war with their bodies. So they feel like, okay, I've made a decision. This is it. I'm going on this diet. But they don't really see that they're making long-term changes that have to be able to be maintained for the next 20, 30, 40 years of their lives.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why you see all those diets failing, because it's, people think, okay, for a short amount of time, I can control myself to get a certain outcome. But if we go back, I mean, it's the same as when you hear about people that win the lottery and like in 2 years down the track, they'll be living in exactly the same conditions as they did beforehand. And there's a beautiful book called The Big Leap. I mean, this has nothing to do with yoga, but anyway, and it's I can't remember the author. Maybe you can put it in the show notes. He speaks about how we have a certain level of happiness that we allow ourselves to have, and as soon as life gets better than that, we manipulate ourselves. And I think that's also when you talk about people making quite good progress initially, like all of a sudden, we're making changes, we're on the surge, and then it's like, oh, like I'm beyond this weight figure that I've always had as the goal. Well, now what do I do? And then we just immediately fall back into old behaviors, because it's almost like life is too good for us to accept or to allow it to be that way. And I think that comes back again to our relationship with ourselves. Like, how happy do you allow yourself to be? And often that can have to do again with our upbringing, about what has been said to us, that, as you said, you're the weird one out, you're the funny bigger person in our family, and all of a sudden all these identities that we've set around ourselves, we question. And it's really like, it goes quite deep into our personality and our own relationships. So we need to make sustainable change, really get to the core of that, and commit to the person that we want to be long term. And it really helps, and you do it fantastic in your work, to like bring people to that state in the future. Like, how do you want life to look and feel like in 10, 20 years? And then based on that, breaking it down, but creating vision boards, like really making that future that someone wants to design for themselves so tangible and real, that that becomes as strong as a pull as the drag back into our old self.
Mm.
Mm.
Mm. And then that means that it's not about being perfect, because that's the other thing, is we make a mistake, we're not perfect. You know, we might set a goal, and then, you know, we might, and it could be a goal about anything, not necessarily about weight loss or nutrition, but it might be a goal about work or something. And, you know, we might have a bad day, or we might not be very productive or something.
Yep.
And then it's very easy to just
Give up.
drop back into, oh, well, I didn't really expect that to work, you know, and that's where that mindset, you know, those repetitive thoughts keep coming in.
Yeah.
I'm living up to my expectations of myself.
Yeah. And that again comes back to the more intimately we are connected with ourselves, the more we have a relationship with ourselves that is built on kindness and compassion and generosity. Again, like if your friend makes a mistake, you talk about it, you encourage them to keep going. That was one day, yes, you slipped up. That doesn't mean like you have to quit. And I think when we look at, I mean, my child can walk for a while now, but like looking how little children learn to walk, they fall all the time.
Yeah.
And they just keep going. And it's not that they have this iron fist determination, I'm going to walk, but it's just this explorative, creative, fun play. And how would life be if we could approach all of our life, all of our projects with that curiosity and joy of just, of course, it helps like having goals to motivate us on like the challenging days, but have that curiosity and joy be the force to push us on, rather than strain and negative clauses. I'm not allowed to do this if I don't do this work until then, and casticizing yourself.
Mm. Yeah, we do tend to put ourselves in little blocks of rules, don't we? We make all these little rules for ourselves. And have I had a productive day today? And I've had a productive day if I've ticked all these things off my boxes.
And I think again, like that's just realizing, how am I talking to myself? What is, and the more we can become quiet and can kind of step away from our thoughts. There's a Buddhist nun called Pema Chodron that writes beautiful books, and she talks about realizing that thoughts are the clouds in front of the blue sky rather than the sky. So another analogy is like that we don't become involved in the traffic, but we are a bystander and we just watch the traffic, watch the thoughts go by. And the more we can just create that little bit of space between us and our thoughts, that we are not our thoughts. We don't even our thoughts just pop up. So why do we beat ourselves up for those thoughts, rather than just, okay, I let that thought go, it's driving down the road wherever it's going, and maybe I can spend a moment to think, okay, where would that thought have come from, but what other car do I want to put on the road, maybe even to counteract that and to put it down a different path.
That's a really great analogy. I really like that. And so if we come back, you know, say for my clients or the people who are listening to this who are interested in, you know, food and nutrition, and not only food and nutrition, but how do they implement and maintain that? That's where those thoughts, you can, you know, you can watch the thought go past and you can say, well, I just had a thought about having some wine and chocolate after work because I had a terrible day and the boss was mean to me. Or I can have a thought, about having something really nourishing for my body and my health and my well-being, because what I eat isn't going to change how the boss behaved today.
Yeah, and oftentimes those things that we do to try and make ourselves like to self-soothe actually make us feel worse in the end.
Yeah.
Because then I wake up the next morning with a bit of a headache and I feel sluggish, and then there's all that, oh, I did this again, and we just keep beating us, and then we just get into this negative loop. And I mean, there's so much research now about neuroplasticity, and the thought traffic analogy is actually like not that far from the truth, because the way how our brain wires is like highways. The more often we have the same thought, the more that path is wired, the easier we slip down that way and off we go. So, and it takes hard work for our brain to rewire itself to different thoughts. But a brain is, as the word says, it's plastic. It is changeable. And even if people say, "Oh, old dogs don't learn new tricks," yes, like, and it's a muscle, and the more we use it, and yes, it does take effort. Like it is going to the gym, and there is a certain motivation that we need to bring to it. But again, if we can bring that motivation plus a level of compassion and kindness, where we just sometimes even just putting our hand on our heart and just feeling, like having that tactical sensation of touch to our heart, like, oh, I'm sorry, sweetheart. Like, yes, you did have a really tough day. That was nice what happened. Like, does that wine really make you feel better, or do you just need a hug, or do you just would you feel equally as good getting a good book, getting a glass of tea, or having a hot bath, putting in like your favorite bath salts and having an early night so that you wake up refreshed, or going out into nature, just getting some fresh air, getting some blood pumping. And so it's really like, and there's no one size fits all. One evening it may be, no, I just need to rest. And one evening it may be like, no, I need to get out into nature. So, but taking that, getting out of that automatic response, and then taking that moment to really tune in. And oftentimes, like, you may be sitting there going, what the hell, like, what's going to arise now? And it's not that your mind is going to say, I want you to go out for a walk now, but there's just something is going to come up, and it may be completely come across as weird, but maybe it's like, I need to call my sister. And who knows what comes out of that conversation. So just being open, and again, coming back to that childlike curiosity and joy, like, what's going to come up today?
That's really beautiful. Really like that. And how about identifying the thoughts? So, we have this, I mean, I forget how many thoughts they say we have every day, thousands of them, like 1,000 or something. And so how do we get ourselves to actually notice those thoughts? This is something that, we've talked about before, and, we talked earlier about, you'll go, oh, there's that thought again. So,
Yeah.
And so how do we notice those for ourselves?
I find that's where an actual practice comes in really handy. So, I mean, I work mainly with equestrians, dressage riders, equestrian athletes, and that's where we're communicating with another living being. So we need to be really clear in ourselves, our mind, our body, our emotions, because everything we do when we're riding a horse gets communicated to the horse. Our thoughts, our emotions, in the way how we posture ourselves in the saddle, like, our bodies express what's going on for us mentally and energetically as well. The horses pick up on it. So, of course, having riding lessons and getting that feedback from a coach standing on the ground and listening to our horse's response to how we're interacting with it is going to be helpful. But I highly recommend to my clients and on the mat practice. And so that can be a physical asana yoga practice, or a physical movement practice. It could be a meditation or mindfulness practice. But having that dedicated practice time where we have nothing else to do apart from being there and doing that practice is a really good way to, without any distractions, really tune in into what's going on, so that we can become more sensitive and more in tune to our thoughts, to our emotions, and to our physical sensations, even like to the point where we even just notice, oh, like I've changed my breath, like all of a sudden I'm really breathing in my chest and holding my breath, breathing quite shallowly. What's going on? Like, is it something that I've just eaten? Is it a conversation that I've just had that just triggered my nervous system in a certain way? And that I mean, the one thing that I do say to my yoga clients is, like, don't be surprised if all of a sudden you become a lot more sensitive to how you're feeling in reaction to certain people, certain behaviors, certain foods and drinks, because we're just so used to kind of tuning out and not being connected with ourselves that all of a sudden when we do connect back in, it's like, wow, like, whew. And people with, this is really an important word of caution. There is, for people with mental health illnesses, it is really important to do this in a guided and supported way. So meditation can be a little bit like when you take a Coke bottle and you shake it a lot, and then all of a sudden you open it up. If someone who has lived their life with trauma or with anything else going on and has really just held it together the whole life, and all of a sudden you go into meditation, like things can come up to the surface. So that's where working with an experienced mindfulness teacher, working with a yoga therapist, I really think yoga therapy has a great place in the world, because it is, mindfulness is oftentimes mainly working with our thoughts and our emotions, whereas the physical practice, there is another beautiful book saying the body keeps the score, where we hold our life experiences in our cells, and when we move our body, there is a release happening. That's why people often sleep better after a yoga practice. That's why oftentimes they get quite emotional during a yoga practice, just because we mindfully move the body in alignment with the breath, and there's a release, there's a softening. But yes, if someone does have pre-diagnosed conditions, working with someone who hasn't just done like I don't offend anyone, but just like an online 10-hour course, just because there is a lot that can come up, and you want to work with someone who is going to be there to hold the space and guide you to the other end, rather than you being left alone and feeling completely vulnerable and exposed when it all comes bubbling up.
Yeah, and then doing more harm than good, possibly.
Because there's a reason that we bottled it all up, because we didn't feel at that point in time that we were able to handle it. So, and that's where a yoga therapist will, yes, there's that big shaken Coke bottle, but then you open it a little bit and then you close it. And so you release and close just as much as the person is able to handle at that point in time. And again, that process is done with a huge level of empathy and compassion and respect for the individual and their individual story. I think I love yoga classes, group classes, because I think for so many people that's the entry point into yoga, and they start experiencing it. But I think once you're down that path, I really believe, like traditionally, yoga was always taught one-on-one, the teacher with the student, so that the practice can be tailored to that person. And again, like if you can breathe, you can do yoga. You don't have to be able to touch your toes. You don't have to be flexible already. Yoga starts with where the individual is at right now, and it's just working within the realms of what's possible for you to guide you to a better outcome for yourself.
I think that's a really important point, because in our Western culture, as you have pointed out earlier, we're sort of so focused on the outcome that we tend to think of yoga as being more, like not an easy exercise class, but like a stretching sort of mobility class.
Yeah.
Rather than, it's different from aerobic fitness, and it's different from muscle building fitness, although it does have a lot of muscle building capabilities with it. But we tend to think of it as being this sort of easy is not the right word, but yes, the stretching mobility class to make us more supple.
Yeah.
Rather than really what you're describing here, which is that connection through your breath to your inner self and your inner awareness of yourself.
Yeah. And I think oftentimes people try yoga and they're like, oh, this is too slow, this is boring. And they get annoyed because all of a sudden, like, it does move at a slower pace, and someone else said, I can't remember who, like the biggest torture for someone would be to be locked in a room alone with your thoughts for a couple of hours. And yoga does that. It puts you on a mat where you're supposed to be with yourself, be with your breath, feel your body, notice your thoughts, feel your emotion without trying to push them away, without trying to validate or fix them, but just being with them and breathing with them. And the yoga practice, I mean, and again, that's where yoga, I mean, whatever is called yoga in today's world, there is a lot of yoga practices that are tailored to exactly what you said. People want a gym workout and call that yoga. People want more flexibility. They want to have those yoga bodies that they see on Instagram. So many yoga group classes are actually more like gym classes. And so it really needs, it's really worthwhile when you are interested in starting a yoga practice, just doing a bit of research and maybe asking a yoga teacher a couple of questions. I'm happy to send you some information on that, about how that teacher is practicing. And so what I practice, you would probably call a breath-centered practice. So where movement is aligned with the breath, and we try and harmonize movement and breath. So on the inhale, you reach the arms up. Exhale, you move the arms down, doing some things on the left, doing some things on the right. But there's always also pauses in between where we just stop, where we still, and where we feel, okay, well, what effect has this movement had on me? How does my left side feel different to my right now? How has my breath changed? So that we can, how has my heart rate changed after moving maybe through a bit more of a rigorous practice? But that we can then take that pause, restore our natural breath, and then go again. And I think that's where, that's the main difference between a workout, like a normal gym workout or whatever you do for your fitness activities, and a yoga practice, is that alignment with breath. And a yoga practice will not push you to go harder, faster, more, but to take those pauses and curiously explore, like what's happening here. And I'm not saying like, I love to go for a run and I love like personal training and a HIIT session every now and again to just really get my blood moving and pushing myself a little bit. But again, it's realizing, and that's where that listening to yourself comes in. How much of that do I need? And on the other side of the spectrum to which what we're talking to now, in the Western world, there's many people that overdo it as well on the harder, faster, and really deplete their body and push themselves so far until there's a collapse on the other hand of the spectrum as well, where there's healing needing to be done in a completely different way than someone who maybe who's maybe bigger.
Mm.
Mm.
Mm. And then we sort of see that a lot, don't you? Because you see that in injuries that end up becoming intractable and they won't heal, and you know, there's a whole process around reaching that point, you know, whether it's pushing yourself too hard nutritionally,
Yeah.
a nutritional process, and then just really being out of touch and out of tune with your body and what your body actually needs. It's about, you know, no pain, no gain, you know,
Yeah.
the person who works the hardest wins kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just a mentality. I mean, that's who gets promoted, who works the hardest and longest in corporate. That's the person that gets the admiration by the others, that pushes themselves harder than the others. And yeah, it's in that way really a bit of a screwed up world where we've arrived at a point. And I think, look, there's no this is the right way and this is the wrong, but finding that balance and being able to steer us back on track. And I don't think it's like when you imagine a plane. I mean, who flies nowadays? But planes, they put the coordinates in, and basically 90% of the time they're off track. So they're just re-navigating themselves to get back on track. And if we can see that as an analogy to how we live our lives, that we just, and it's not 10%, but it's just like 2% here. Oh, okay, I've just had a little bit too much cake at lunchtime. Maybe I'll just drink a little bit more water today.
Yeah.
I'll just like do another extra 5 minutes. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be that same day. If we look with children, you look at what do they eat over the course of a week rather than every single day needs to be perfect. And yeah, and it's can we treat ourselves a little bit more like that child, like our best friend, like the people, animals, whoever it is that we care for most, rather than all of a sudden having this standard for everyone else, and I have to reach this standard though to be able to go into bed with myself in the evening being at least not disappointed with myself.
Yeah. That's perfectly said. So with yoga practice, what about for older people and what about for men? Because a lot of men feel that they're a lot stiffer, and you know, you said you don't have to be able to get into all these really complicated poses. So, you know, older women and men and older men, you know, what do you recommend for them? How do they start?
A couple of answers to that question. I think ideally when you work with a yoga teacher one-on-one, they are going to tailor the practice to you and exactly the you that shows up at their doorstep. If moving into a group class setting, arriving there with an awareness that some people are going to be there for the workout. Some people are going to be there to compare themselves with others and trying to outdo them in a yoga practice, which like completely blows my mind. But still, when I go to yoga practice, yoga group class as a student, it's sometimes like, no, it very often still happens to me too, that I go, oh, how come they look like that aligned in the pose and I'm really struggling here? And it's human nature. It doesn't make me a bad yoga teacher. If I can bring that level of humor and lightness to that realization. But if we can see our yoga practice as a opportunity to connect with ourselves and move in a way that serves our highest good. If you can use your yoga practice to just explore how your body feels, and I often use the term finding the edges of your body. And it's not that we want to push past our edges, but we want to honor those edges and then breathe with them. So if I'm standing up and I'm folding forward, hinging from the hips, softening the knees, that I feel, oh, okay, where is it? Where am I feeling tightness? And then directing in my mind's eye my breath to those areas and see, can I extend my exhale a little bit to see if I can just work with that parasympathetic nervous system for relaxation, for release, rather than trying to push my way through it. And that's when injuries happen. I mean, there's so many yoga injuries, it's not even funny for a practice that's supposed to be healing. But it's just because the application is done in the wrong way, either by guidance, and I would like to say uneducated guidance by a teacher, because I do not believe any teacher would intentionally want to do harm to their students. But it's just that often yoga teachers also only do, there's a lot of different levels of training that you can do as a yoga teacher. And I think the main thing is that you have a yoga teacher that continues to seek to self-educate or continuously educate themselves to learn more about the body, mind, energy, and healing capacities of yoga.
Oh, that's great. You're in your yoga studio. Have you got a couple of simple things you'd be able to demonstrate that people could?
Yeah.
That would be, I reckon that would be great.
Standing, sitting, what do you want?
You whatever you think is most appropriate.
Okay. Put me on the spot here, but I'll see what I can.
I did put you on the spot a little bit, but
I'll take my Ugg boots off because it's cold. Well, compared to New Zealand, it's not cold, but it's a bit chilly. Okay. We'll do 2 things standing, and then we'll do 2 or 3 things sitting down. Do we have the time?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to do side on so you can see my body a little bit better. So first of all, I would recommend people to just find a comfortable standing position, having their feet hip-width apart, feet pointing forward, and just stand up. And oftentimes it helps because if you just walking forward and back a couple of times and then coming to stand, and then imagine someone tells you to stand up tall. So what you would do there is you would probably press your knees out, you would lift your chest, and you would notice that your breath, you inhale and you hold your breath in your chest. And so I would like to ask you then to relax the breath, relax the shoulders down, and we're working towards finding our natural posture. And this is then a posture that we can take into everyday life. And our posture doesn't only affect the way how we breathe, but also affects the way how we feel in many ways, partially through the breath, partially just through physiologically how we hold our body has an effect on how we feel. So for many people, if we start from the feet up, first of all, I want you to maybe even close the eyes and just feel the soles of the feet, ideally barefoot, making contact with the floor. and just noticing where you feel your weight being distributed. Are you standing more towards the weight in your heels, leaning back a bit? Are you tipping forward? And just trying to bring the weight equally over 3 spots in your foot. So underneath your little toes, underneath your big toe, and your heel. So balancing yourself forward and back until you feel that on those 3 spots, you're nicely balanced. And then growing up tall, moving to your hips, you want to that you have a flashlight in between your legs and tilting your pelvis back and then forward. Imagine yourself flat, pointing that flashlight forward and back, and just notice how that it may take you a couple of times to help putting the hands on your hips to just feel yourself actually bring awareness into that area that we don't often kind of consciously use. And then imagine yourself having that flashlight point right down. And for some people, that may mean that you have to keep your knees slightly bent in order, because when you're standing with your legs straight, especially if you have a little bit of flexibility like me, your flashlight will point slightly back. So just feel how your hips, how your pelvis needs to be. If there was a bowl of water, that it wouldn't be tipping out the front or the back, but would be nice and balanced. And then imagine someone drawing you up by the top of your head, making you longer. So you're just feeling the vertebrae in your spine gently reaching up, but then you relax your shoulders down away from your ears, as if there was a little weight attached to your shoulders or maybe your arms. And then same, the exercise that we did with our hips, we move our chin forward and back. Because oftentimes in our posture, we may have our chin more forward. I think they call it the crow, or more back. So moving the chin forward and back and seeing if we can find that place where our head is nicely balanced and gently floats on top of our spine. Oftentimes that means gently bringing the chin a little bit more down towards our chest so that the back of our neck is nice and long. Lifting the sternum gently up, allowing the shoulders to open up, maybe even drawing the hands forward, which can also open up the chest a little bit. And voila, we have arrived in our natural stance or in our ideal posture. And then just feel, maybe if you're feeling comfortable here, closing the eyes, feeling into the body. Maybe again doing a scan from the feet. Are my knees holding any tension into the pelvis? Where's my flashlight? Lifting the spine, finding spaces in between the vertebrae. Lifting our sternum, drawing our chin forward and back. Chin gently towards the chest and drawing the hands forward. And then noticing where you're breathing. Is your breathing mainly happening across your chest? Or are you also feeling your breath happening in your belly? And see if you can, on your next inhale, soften the belly in this stance, allow it to move up, because many of us also are so used to pulling, especially women, pulling our belly in all the time. Can you relax the belly out, and on the exhale, you may know how naturally the belly just gently draws towards the spine. And even just that realization of, wow, this is hard work, actually standing in a neutral posture can be a big thing. But it will just help you if you do this like on the mat practice. It will help you when you go through your life, when you're standing, doing the dishes, waiting in the line for your coffee, how you're standing oftentimes, and where am I holding my breath. So while we're standing, we'll just do one more thing. So on the inhale, we reach the arms forward and up, keeping the knees nicely bent. And if it feels like your shoulders are reaching up towards your ears when you bring the arms up, just allowing the elbows down. And then drawing the navel in and hinging from the hips, folding forward. Keeping the knees nice and soft, almost as if you wanted to just rest your torso on your thighs. Nodding, shaking the head, releasing any tension here. Maybe holding onto the elbows, swaying from side to side. Maybe bending one leg, straightening the other. And then just staying here again, just checking in. There's no tension held in the head and neck. Allowing gravity to do its work, allowing the weight of your head to lengthen the spine down. Hands can reach down towards the floor. And then see if you can gently work on lengthening the back of your legs, lifting your seat bones up while your head reaches down. And again, this is not about forcing. And if you just stay here for a moment, you'll notice on the inhale how the breath naturally moves away from the thighs a bit. And see, can you on the exhale fold in a little bit more? Keeping the knees nice and soft. And then on the inhale, coming back into a halfway lift. Exhaling here, placing the hands on the hips, and with soft knees, hinging from the hips, coming all the way up to standing, lowering the arms back down.
Beautiful.
Do you want me to do one sitting, or is that?
How are you for time? Are you okay?
I'd be okay to do one more.
All right. Cool.
Yeah. People can just skip that if it becomes too boring for them. So when sitting down, I suggest to have at least one blanket, depending on tightness in knees. It actually makes sense sitting on a chair or having even a bigger bolster so that you can sit yourself up. You can just bring the legs out one in front of the other. It doesn't have to be full lotus pose, but it helps if you can tilt your pelvis forward a bit so that you flatten out your lower back. And then bringing one hand on each thigh, feeling yourself growing nice and tall here. Again, imagine yourself being gently pulled up by the top of your head, chin is tucked in, and then feeling the connection through your seat bones down into the surface you're sitting on. And then on the inhale, we reach the arms over the head and up. Exhale, drawing the hands through center. Just imagine yourself on the inhale, scooping up all the beautiful air around you. On the exhale, drawing it down, centering yourself in this moment. One more time, reaching the arms out and up. Feel your ribs reaching up. Exhale, bringing the hands to heart, bringing yourself right back into this moment. And on the inhale, reaching the arms outward, lifting the chest. And on the exhale, folding in and giving yourself a big hug. Just feeling your hands wrapped around you. Inhaling, reaching up. Maybe if I show it from the side. Exhale, drawing the navel in, rounding the spine, hugging yourself in. Inhale, tilting the pelvis. Exhale, folding in. And then coming all the way back to center and returning to your breath. And even these two simple exercises will help just increase your awareness of your breath, that tactile sensation of you holding yourself, especially during lockdown when we are living by ourselves. Being able to feel that physical touch of and with another human being can be really soothing, and what we like as human, that's what we need. So if there's no one else to hug, giving ourselves one of those.
Those looked really amazing. And, you know, nobody has to be able to, like you say, get into a full lotus pose, or even to be able to touch their, you know, forward bend and touch their hands on the floor. They can, if they can only get to their thighs, that's as far as they go.
Yeah, but it will allow you an avenue to feel your body. And if you are a bit bigger and you feel your belly against your thighs, like loving, feeling all of that. This is all you. The more you try and push it away and not feel it, the more you are at war with your body. But the more you're like, yeah, this is me. And you can do that sitting posture in a chair, sitting upright. Like you don't even have to sit on the floor to do that.
Well, I'll go and give it a go after we've finished talking.
Yeah.
You'll finally get me doing some poses after.
Look, and it's not as sexy as many of the things that we see online, but that is really where I see the most beauty and value and like the true healing power of yoga. It's not in all those handstands and headstands that we see everywhere. Yes, absolutely, there's merit to some of those poses, and if you are an advanced practitioner, and it's like it can be really good and helpful to move into those poses, but not for everyone all of the time.
Well, thank you for that. It's been really super talking to you. I knew it would be. Where can people find you, Anna? Is there, I think last time we were talking last Friday, and I can't remember, you were talking about an online program you were running. Is that for the general public, or is that just mostly for your dressage riders?
It's mainly for dressage riders. So it's a yoga for riders 10-week course. I mean, other people are welcome to attend. I do make lots of references to horses and situations in the saddle. So if people can overlook that, they're welcome to join. This is kind of a taster of the style of yoga I teach. But I also offer one-on-one yoga practices, and here and there I offer a free online yoga class. So people want to get in contact with me or subscribe to my newsletter, they're welcome to do it there. A lot of my topic is around horses, but it's just the area that I choose to specialize in, mostly because of my own personal interests.
Yeah, but it's applicable. It is applicable to everybody.
Yeah.
And some people will have seen you, because sometimes I share some of your dressage tests on my Facebook page.
Yes, because you're and I just want to mention it. New Zealand has a beautiful, beautiful teacher called Donna Fari that I haven't met her in person, but I've done a couple of her courses and love her books. Who is based in New Zealand, and she is one I would absolutely recommend for any practices and videos. She's more of a generalist yoga teacher. So she is one, especially for the people listening from New Zealand, that I absolutely admire and recommend.
Great. Well, I'll get all your details from you and put them in the show notes so people can figure out how they can tune into your newsletter and follow you. And, you know, if there are any dressage riders or other horse people out there, they might like to touch. And I'll get Donna, did you say her name was?
Donna Fari. I always get the spelling of her last name wrong, if it's Fahri or Farhi, but Donna Fari. Yeah.
All right. I might be able to get that off you, and I'll put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. The hour, we've gone over an hour and it's gone so quickly.
I really enjoyed it too. Thank you for the opportunity to chat about one of my favorite topics.
It's a pleasure. And, you know, you never know that there might be an opportunity to do something again in the future.
Yes.
All right. I'll talk to you again on Friday anyway. So
yes, looking forward to it. Thank you, Susan. All the best to you and your clients. They're very lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.